Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Chris Papin. Hi, Chris.
Hello, thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. I'm very excited about our conversation because we are going to talk about organization. We're going to talk about things that matter and also how to account for those things that might not be that easily part of the system. So that's going to be a great conversation. But first, let me introduce you. So here's your bio. So Chris, you are a multi-talented professional with an impressive array of qualifications that give you a unique holistic perspective as an advisor, because you are a lawyer, an attorney, a CPA, a life accident and health insurance producer. So you see life from different angles, and you like to help entrepreneurs, and you wrote a book. What's the name of your book?
Yeah, so the book is 168 hours, a business guide that respects your time. The 168 hours happens to be equivalent to the time in a week for those that didn't catch that math in the beginning. But it speaks to kind of all those things that entrepreneurs or small business owners feel as pressure points. And hopefully it helps everybody create clarity so that they know what they should be focusing on, when they should be focusing on it, and putting their priorities first, because sometimes we get lost.
We do. So what are some of the principles of your book?
First and foremost, I ask everybody to kind of think about why they want to be a business owner. And most people answer with 3 or 4 basic concepts in mind that kind of revolve around flexibility of schedule, usually some version of financial freedom, some element of control, and there's also like a creativity element where maybe I'm working inside an organization, but they do it differently than the way I see it, and I can do it a little bit differently and serve a different niche client base.
Chris,
So,
that's very interesting because we have done a survey and that's exactly what came up. I asked entrepreneurs, what do you like most about being a business owner? And the number one answer was freedom.
yeah.
And then you ask freedom to what? Freedom to create. And those were the exact buttons that came up. So it's very interesting because obviously you've done the same survey and that's what comes up.
Ours is a little less formal. Each client we work with, we create what we call a top 10 list, and people list their goals, and you start to see these patterns over time. And fortunately, we have a CRM that helps us track it. But yeah, I mean, it boils down, the book and the essence of the book boil down to, I think people show up on Monday morning and they do what they're worried about, what they're scared of, or what the squeaky wheel is. And that may or may not align to the whole reason they set the business up. And
That's
when we
true.
get lost in that noise, what are we supposed to do next? And again, every business has their own objectives. Obviously, people want to make money, but at what level? So I like to draw analogies to sports. But when people are playing, say, basketball, we recognize where the boundaries are, and the objective is to score more points than the other team. Well, in business, that's a little bit less defined. What is success? And if the business leaders aren't defining that and aligning their business to that, they get lost. And
That's
there's a
right.
direct correlation there. So that's what it all boils down to. Obviously, we can talk in more detail in different ways, but that's
No,
kind of the synopsis.
that is very true. You have to have that goal and you have to have that alignment. So let's say you decide your goal as a business owner and then you align everything to it. What's the next step in order to to be able to control your time.
Yeah, it's this. I always try to say this. It's not an exercise of time blocking because it's not that simple. Even though time blocking is an essential element, like you have to be able to know what to do and when and have the appropriate time schedule to do it, but you also have to have slack or unscheduled time so that you can deal with adaptations, unexpected changes. So the way I look at it is business leader is looking forward and it's kind of like a Google Maps or Apple Maps or I've got destination A and destination B. If you take a wrong turn, that blue line switches for you, and that's what the business leader needs to be doing. Sometimes there's traffic, sometimes there's an unexpected hurdle with production, sometimes you lose a key person and you have to adapt. But what do we adapt to? So on the map, we always know what our destination is. And that's where I think people get clouded in maybe they're in startup mode. And while we're in startup mode, we're very cost conscious. We don't want to spend excessively, or we don't want to, we will do things in-house to avoid having to pay for it, which is fine as long as we recognize that means you're going to have to spend more time working, and that might sacrifice your time freedom element. So drawing those correlations, again, there's no right recipe. You've got to make what works for you, but as long as you're intentional with what's going on, you can't say I'm going to work fewer hours, but I'm also going to do all of my advertising in-house. It doesn't work that way. And
Right,
if
you have to
we
give and
are
take.
realistic, it works well. And I'm
That's
sure
right.
you've fought this, especially like as you're going through with people, they tell you what the process is, and then as you start to memorialize what that actually looks like, you find out the process is something different than they thought, isn't
Absolutely.
it?
Or should be. Or like what it is right now, it's not necessarily what should be, and then what should it be? Yes, I
Yes.
agree with
Yes.
that. I agree with that. Um, Tell me some wins that you have by using this system. Like, how did it transform you personally?
So for my firms, one of the hardest things for a client to kind of step in and understand is what I actually do for a living. They understand what an attorney might do, and everybody assumes I go to the courthouse, and I'm not a trial attorney. We are more transactional in nature, focus on the business owner needs, contracts, buying and selling businesses, expansions, estate plans. Usually paper pushing is kind of the way I tease about it. But when you start to blend these disciplines, my role as the attorney or as the CPA or maybe as the insurance person is really that of kind of a subordinate. So if I can get people to understand, I really want to sit at the board of directors table with the ownership constituents and help them make reasonable decisions. Well, how do you make a good financial decision? You need good financial information to do that. And this is where my role as a CPA can be subordinate to that board, where you can delegate to us certain duties so that we have good financial statements to make those financial decisions. And if you've never done that, it's difficult. Or if you have done that, maybe in a large corporate environment, doing that in a small environment is different. And kind of understanding that value proposition can be weird. I mean, I know there's tons of stuff where I'm going, oh, that was so much fun. I never thought it'd be that fun because
Right.
I didn't have the experience before. So that's where I try to get people to align the thought process of I need to be your trusted advisor. Trusted is both good and bad. We can disagree as long as we do it respectfully so that we can navigate through to get to the objectives that are most important.
Right.
And how you get there, always, that's to be determined. But at the end of the day, if I don't have business owners that can enumerate goals, wishes, ambitions, I don't know what my objective is. And that makes scope really, really hard.
That makes sense. So you when you figure out your objectives, then using your method of what you wrote in the 168 hours, how do you achieve success?
So it starts first, let's assume somebody gave us that top 10 list. That's always kind of where we start. We will look at maybe 3 to 5 key components. Some of those components, typically, say financial and tax planning. they will reach out to the CPA firm and ask about. Maybe they ask about estate planning. Okay, my law firm can assist with that. Perhaps they're looking at some sort of strategic lending. Well, I can't do that, but we will bring other banking partners, lending partners to the table. So we first try to identify what are those goals and what are, let's say that's a 8 to 12 month time frame that we're going to try to line all of these conversations up. If the client doesn't have good financial statements, we can't go to the bank and ask for a loan. Or if we have financial statements that tell one story on paper but don't tell the rest of the story. Maybe they're
Mhm.
not as profitable as a business because we have been investing in infrastructure. You've got to be able to tell that story to a bank. And clients, I'm not taking shots at clients here, but clients' understanding of financials and banking understanding of financials are different than CPA firm understanding of financials. So
True.
getting that story into a format that everybody understands who's in what seat on the bus, what role do we play, what are the objectives, and how can we all come together? Because in this scenario, the CPA firm, the bank, and the client are forming some sort of contractual agreement, a form of a partnership, informal partnership, but working so that we can all achieve objectives together. Every banker I know lines up to help clients succeed, but oftentimes clients don't feel like that because the term sheets seem punitive or difficult or they don't understand what's going on.
Right.
So it's that process. And I know I'm kind of abstract with this, but it's let's take these things, line them up, and get them in a natural sequence and develop some sort of normal expectation. A lot of clients want to, can't we just hurry up and do all the things in 6 weeks? No,
No.
it takes 18 months to do stuff like this. So maybe we can compress that to 12 if you're organized, but getting that expectation laid out, getting a reasonable timeline, getting reasonable objectives, that's where you start. Now you got your baseline. Then we have to benchmark. Sometimes we're above the baseline, sometimes we're below. And if you don't have the data to benchmark against, and this is where like systems inside of businesses, think about your experience at a drive-through window. When you get to the little kiosk, you tell people what you want. The
Right.
kiosk puts it into a system. Everybody starts doing their dance in harmony so that 3 to 5 minutes later, you have a bag of food. And that's what the system's all about. So we have to kind of create this understanding of these external objectives and then realign them to what do we do every day so that what we're doing every day hits those external objectives. Super easy and super hard all at the same time.
Absolutely. No, I can totally see that. Totally see that. We talked about also, you talk about what happens when we actually encounter actions that are outside of our comfort zone, outside the systems. What are some examples of that?
Yeah, so the first is something that I kind of tease to use as encouragement to get into the book, but a lot of folks do what's natural to them. I am a CPA, so I'm going to go work on financial statements and do tax returns. Well, that's not all a CPA firm does. It's just like every other business. We need to market. We need to have a presence online. We need to have systems. We need to have security. We need to have IT protocols, like all the things that every other business has. But what I find is business owners, especially ones that are really good at their craft, get lost in their craft and say, forget about all this other stuff.
Right.
So that's one place they get lost very, very fast. And I think it's incredibly important for people to sit down and kind of focus in that little bubble of what are all the things I should be doing as the business owner, not just the things I'm good at. So that's one layer of discomfort. Then the second turns into if you knew what was going on and you could set the system up to work perfectly every time until the end of time, you probably wouldn't be doing what you're doing for a living. You would
Right.
be clairvoyant in some way. So we have to embrace that the system takes care of like the first standard deviation, maybe the second of statistical likelihoods in your business. And then you have to build a different filter to catch those things that fall outside the system. So
Right.
teasingly, dear friend of mine, Will Hill, and I talk about this all the time, but you need a system for when you don't have a system.
So
And
what's
that's
the
what it boils
system
down
when you
to.
don't have a system? Let's talk about that. What's that system?
Well, I think first and foremost is to identify that this doesn't fit in the system for whatever reason. And that's tough sometimes because you're just kind of doing your thing. And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, well, we're a couple of weeks behind on this project, but we'll get caught up whenever we talk to the client. And then, you try to talk to the client, and then a month goes by because the client's been on vacation and busy. And now we're 6 weeks behind. And by the time you get the information, now you're already 8 weeks behind. You should have flagged that at 2 weeks. It's not normal. Why? Then from there, this is where like the decision tree just blows up and turns into a crazy mess. But you generally need to identify, from my perspective, I work with mostly service-based people. You need to identify the project leader that has the scope and the ability to manage whatever that project is. That might be that it needs to go to the owner. And that's frustrating sometimes because I listen to doctors all the time, and they're like, I don't understand why I personally have to call the pharmacy to make sure they got the prescription right.
Well,
You've
why do
got
they? What's the reason they do?
they shouldn't have to, but something went wrong or
Well, I think
something's
it's lack of, in
unique.
my opinion, in my world, it's lack of process.
Most of the time it is.
I mean, it's people, process, people, problem, process, problem, or both. Yes.
Yeah. So in these one-off scenarios, again, we have to build slack to deal with whatever it is. My experience in medicine is that it's a specialty drug, or maybe it requires a specialty pharmacy or a compounding or something along those lines. So it's not just as simple as send it out and it's good. Or
Yeah.
send it to Walgreens and Walgreens doesn't cover it, but CVS does under the insurance, or vice versa. There's all these different things that pop up. But if you have the system to triage that, you can take your highest priced people and maybe insert them only in the 3 or 4 minutes when they need it. They don't need to do the 5 or 6 hours worth of process there.
Yeah.
So identifying is number one, making sure you have talent alignment is number two, and then resetting what those objectives are. And sometimes it's, hey, I only know the next 3 steps. We all need to come together in 2 days whenever those are done and figure out what we need to do next. Sometimes you just identify alternative process and let it run.
That's
But
right.
you don't know. Sometimes you don't know, and it's okay not to know.
Right. And that's the realization that you don't know, and it's fine. And then from there, you find a solution.
Yeah.
So, Chris, why do you think processes are so important in a business?
I see it to come from two different perspectives, and they're kind of on opposite ends of one another. When I say basketball, everybody has an understanding of what I mean. The process for basketball is the rule book.
The
It's the
playbook.
thing
Yeah.
we've been watching forever and everybody knows and assumes. So I think sometimes we get the wrong concept of process in our head. The process is not actually there to limit people in their role or to force them to do extra tasks. It's to make them be more efficient. It's to make the process go in a very specific way. So I've set up on one side. We need to lean into that and realize it's a tool to help us achieve the objective. The other side of it is the expectation. There's a client expectation, there's team, there's business, there's a lot of expectation in there. But again, I said basketball. Nobody expected anyone to be kicking the ball around. They fully understand we're using our hands in that sport. So again, you're creating an expectation with the process, and particularly in services, let's run with this medical example. Most people know they're going to go to the waiting room, fill out some sort of digital or paper questionnaire, give some insurance, get checked in, wait for a few minutes, go to a nurse or some sort of paraprofessional that's going to help the beginning intake process. Then you're going to go to the next room, and then you're going to meet with the doctor. That part we do well. But what happens when that doesn't play out? Or what happens when there's an extra layer of a test? That's where the expectations and I think the experience degrades because people don't know what's going to happen. And in medicine, we don't always know what to do next. Well, we're going to run labs. I'll let you know when they come back. That typically takes 5 to 7 days, but it might take 10, it might take 3. We don't know.
Right.
So creating that expectation and getting the majority that fits in your bubble with the same or a similar expectation, then being accountable to it, which is probably the biggest piece of the puzzle. If you said, I'm going to call you in 3 days, and you call in 3 days and say, hey, I told you I'd call you. I'm sorry, but I don't have your answers. That's going to land so much better than if you take 7, because the minute the expectation deviates, people don't know what to do. And all they want is clarity as to what do I do next?
Right. So it's predictability. I agree 100%.
Yes. Yeah, that's probably a better way to put it.
Yeah, consistency, predictability, absolutely. Well, Chris, you definitely imparted so much knowledge and shared with us. If our listeners would like to know more about you or reach out to you, how can they do that?
Yeah, 2 particular ways. Search my name, Chris, Chris, Papin, P as in Paul, A, P as in Paul, I, N as in Nancy, on LinkedIn. I push out all kinds of fun stuff that funnels to all the different firms. Another great resource is my name, papinspeaks.com. We've got kind of some fun tips and tricks, and if you want to opt into kind of email tips and tricks process, we've got all kinds of materials there.
Beautiful. Okay, and we'll include it also in the show notes. So Chris, thank you very much for being a guest on this podcast. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
I appreciate the opportunity and time. I also like what you're doing to help people out and getting the word out there. So keep doing all that good work that you do.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.